It's Sunday morning. I'm not looking my best. It was a bit of a late one last night watching Pascal vs Kovalev, but I wanted to put down a few thoughts when it was still fresh in my mind. Very, very entertaining fight. Sergey Kovalev wins by knockout in the 8th round, I believe. John Pascal, really, really spirited performance. He showed he had a good chin. He showed he had a lot of heart, a lot of determination, and to me, even in defeat, he goes up in terms of my estimations of him. Let me start by saying, I know there's a bit of a debate as to the stoppage. Should it have been a stoppage? Should it have been allowed to go on? In my opinion, definite stoppage. John Pascal completely out on his feet, didn't seem to have control of his legs. For me, very, very much a good stoppage from the referee. I've got no complaints there whatsoever. Whilst it was a good fight, there's also been several YouTube channels suggesting there should be a rematch. I don't necessarily feel the need for a rematch here. Entertaining, I'd certainly watch it if there was a rematch. But let's be honest, Sergey Kovalev proved he was the better man last night, and I don't really see the result changing if they meet again in 6 months or a year's time. So let's start with the fight. Sergey Kovalev very much initially started the fight as the come-forward fighter. John Pascal boxing off the back foot. Initially, rounds 1 and round 2, John Pascal being slightly lower volume. Kovalev sort of, pushing the action, coming forward, being a bit more of the active fighter. John Pascal just kind of using movement, trying to dance around him, trying to circle around the ring. I thought from the start of this fight, and this was a constant theme throughout, the Kovalev jab was a real weapon. And he used that jab very effectively. I was very impressed by the jab from Kovalev. Very accurate, clearly quite a painful, stinging punch. Real good stuff from Kovalev. Rounds 3, it opens up a bit more. John Pascal, typical like John Pascal, he's not fighting necessarily for 3 minutes of every round. He's fighting in spurts. He's running in, trying to land a few power punches and then get out of there. Almost like David Haye style ambush stuff. I could see, obviously he's been working with Roy Jones. Not saying John Pascal didn't have this approach beforehand, but working with Roy Jones has probably only heightened this as well. But, John Pascal, for me, he's not winning the rounds. Rounds 1 through to 4, he's not winning the rounds, but he's being competitive in each round. Whilst Sergey Kovalev is probably the busier man, the more accurate man, more consistently fighting throughout the course of the round. John Pascal is giving him, is asking him questions. John Pascal is doing enough to make the fight competitive. He's doing enough to stay in the fight. Now, what I would say as the fight moved on, John Pascal, whilst he wasn't as accurate as Kovalev, he was starting to land with some half-decent shots. There were a number of occasions that Pascal was able to land to the body of Kovalev, and Pascal's quite a big puncher. I mean, he's not a Kovalev puncher or a Stevenson puncher, but he's a big puncher, and he was landing these shots to Kovalev's body, and you could tell Kovalev was feeling it. Kovalev didn't like it. Also, Kovalev was a tiny bit open when he was coming in, and Pascal was able to catch him a few times on the way in. But what I would say is, Kovalev showed that he hasn't got any chin issues in this fight. I saw a few people on forums saying that he'd been dropped in sparring, that, the first time he faces a decent fighter, a decent punching power, he's going to get knocked out. His wins against Cleverly, his wins against Hopkins were against guys who couldn't punch. And yeah, I think that's all true, but, well, I certainly think the wins against Hopkins are true. Not saying he got dropped in sparring, but, he was getting tagged by John Pascal, and whilst he obviously didn't enjoy that experience, it didn't look to me that he was ever going to get stopped and that he was genuinely hurt at any stage of the fight. For me, Kovalev very much controlled, dominated the fight. I think Paul Smith on the Sky commentary team gave John Pascal rounds 5 and 6. I can see an argument for that. Pascal started coming into the fight a bit more in those rounds. But soon, straight after that, Kovalev was reasserting. He had the ability to hurt Pascal. You saw Pascal wobbled on a number of occasions. He got dropped in round 3, and you could tell when he came out for round 4 he still hadn't recovered. Similar situation, he got caught at the end of round 7, and when he came out for round 8, he wasn't ready. He was still getting over the punch from the round before. And kind of speaks volumes about the power of Sergey Kovalev, that somebody with a great chin like John Pascal, somebody who had a minute between rounds to recover, was still, not necessarily having control of his legs even after the break of a round. So, for Kovalev, I thought this was a very, very strong performance. Good boxing skills, excellent jab, accuracy, power. We knew the power was also there. One or two minor defensive lapses, but he showed great chin and great durability. He didn't look hurt by the John Pascal assault. Now, what I would say is, having watched this fight, I would make Sergey Kovalev a large favourite over Adonis Stevenson. However, I wouldn't completely rule Adonis Stevenson out, because I think Adonis Stevenson is a much harder puncher than John Pascal. And the way Pascal was landing on Kovalev, both to the body and, to the head to an extent, you'd have to say, if Stevenson's landing those kind of shots, he's able to have the same sort of effect as, as John Pascal, if he's able to land those punches, but with Stevenson's power, you can't rule him out of the fight. I think Kovalev has given me less concerns about his durability than Stevenson has, so it could be one of those classic examples of whoever lands first gets to win. And I also think Kovalev may be the better boxer, perhaps. So I'd certainly be strongly leaning towards Kovalev in this fight, but I wouldn't rule Adonis Stevenson out, and that's a fight that I would like to see very, very much. Let me know your thoughts on this one. Thanks for watching. Were you as impressed as I was by Sergey Kovalev? What did you make of his defence? Is that a concern?